Hello and welcome everyone for our weekly session titled Latest in Bitcoin Tech, where we go through the Bitcoin Optech newsletter. And this week we will go through the Optech newsletter number 319, published on 6th of September 2024. As always, it contains a news section which has three news articles, releases, and release candidates, quite a few of them and a few code and documentation changes. Let's see how much of it will we be able to cover, because I would also be interested in going through the Bitcoin Core 28.0 RC release candidate and share with the participants what new has been added and encourage them to test. So the preface of this week's news article goes like this. This week's newsletter summarizes a proposal for allowing Stratum V2 pool miners to receive compensation for the transaction fees contained in the block templates they turn into shares. Announces a research fund investigating the proposed OpCAD opcode and describes a discussion about mitigating Merkle tree vulnerabilities with or without a soft fork. Also included are our regular sections announcing new releases and release candidates, as well as describing notable changes to popular Bitcoin infrastructure. So, yes, the first news article being about Stratum V2. Not exactly about Stratum V2, but about an extension. Stratum V2 extension for fee revenue sharing. Filippo Mole posted to Delving Bitcoin about an extension to Stratum V2 that will allow tracking the amount of fees included in shares when the shares contain transactions selected by an individual miner. This can be used to adjust the amount paid to the miner by the pool, with miners selecting higher fee rate transactions being paid more. Morley links to a paper he co-authored that examines some of the challenges of paying different miners different amounts based on the transactions they select. The paper suggests a scheme that is compatible with pay for last end shares pooled mining payout scheme. His post links to two in progress implementations of the scheme. All right. So this news article talks about a Stratum V2 extension. What does a Stratum V2 extension do and why is it needed? So how Stratum V1 works is that block creation is centralized in Stratum V1. Meaning if you are a solo miner, then you obviously create your own block. But if you are a pooled miner, if you are mining with a pool, then you do not have any prerogative to have a say in the template creation. It is absolutely centralized. It's the mining pool that creates the job templates or the block templates, and you have to work on it. And in fact, in most cases, the template that you are working on as a minor you don't even know. So the pool, let alone asking you or taking your opinion in what transactions to include and what transactions to not include, the pool will have absolute monopoly over deciding what transactions the pool will include in the block and what transactions the pool will not. And to the extent, I mean, the monopolies to the extent that the pools will not even share with you what transactions they have included. Now there are exclusions. Some very few pools do that, but majority of the pools won't even share with you what transaction they've included. So as a miner, you are just blindly hashing something that you don't even know. You have absolutely no say in what transactions should enter the block and what shouldn't, and you don't even know what block are you expending your hash rate on. So it's like the mining pool is like the boss or the owner, and the miners are employees. That is how Stratum V1 works. That is how even till this day the ecosystem, the Bitcoin mining, overwhelming majority of Bitcoin mining ecosystem works. Is that the individual miners do not have any say. It's the pool that single-handedly takes all the decision, and it's in fact not even possible for the miners to verify whether they have been paid appropriately, because it's absolutely possible, right? Because if the mining pool is not even sharing the template with you, how do you even know that the mining pool has not accepted out of band transactions, right? So if you see the template which you are hashing and the actual block that has been mined is different from the template that you are hashing, you can figure out that the mining pool has accepted some out of band transactions. But in this case, what happens is that as the miner, you don't even know whether the mining pool has accepted some out of band transactions. It might be the case that the mining pool might accept out of band transactions and accept fee for those out of band transactions and not give you a share of that fee, right? Because you will only see the fee that has been paid over the Bitcoin's P2P network, right? But because you have not seen the candidate block, you are not aware whether the mining pool has accepted some out of band fee, and because that out of band fee happens out of the network obviously, and that does not reflect in the pool. So like there are a lot of drawbacks or a lot of centralization points or bottlenecks in Stratum V1. And the remote miners like are mere employees. They have absolutely no say. They're, I mean, a lot of people say that's not even mining, you're just selling a hash rate. So such people are called as hashers or hash leasers. They lease out their hash. That is how Stratum 1 works. Now, the change in Stratum V2, other than the technical or the cryptographic level changes, which include end-to-end encryption, initially the messages that were transferred between the individual miners, the to and fro messages that were transferred between the individual miners and the mining pool. So Stratum basically is a protocol that facilitates interaction. It's a mining protocol that facilitates interaction between uh, miners, remote miners, and mining pool. So uh, what Stratum V2 does is that it facilitates or it incorporates end-to-end encryption. So the messages or the information that is passed to and fro the miners and the mining pool is now encrypted. And also the data that is transmitted over the network, initially it was transmitted using JSON objects. Now it is transmitted in the form of binary data, zeros and ones, which reduces the size of the data that is being transmitted exponentially, thereby reducing the latency and the bandwidth. So these are some of the technical or cryptographic level enhancements that Stratum V2 proposes. Is encryption, end-to-end encryption of the messages that are being transported between the miners and the pools, and uh, reduced bandwidth and reduced latency. Other than that, the USP or the talking point of Stratum V2 over the years has been the fact that it allows decentralized creation of block templates. So the protocol is being designed with an idea that individual miners or remote miners should be allowed to curate their own blocks. So the idea is to take away the veto power that the mining pools have, and the sole authority that the mining pools have of creating block templates and diversifying or distributing a share of that power to remote miners. Now, we also have to keep in mind that it does not mean that the mining pool cannot create its own block. It does not mean that the mining pool now has no right to create their own blocks. It's only the remote miners that do that. No, it's the mining pool that will still create its own block, and it's the mining pool that will still hash its own block. But if the mining pool wants, the mining pool can also accept block templates created by remote miners, right? Like every single mining pool has their own infrastructure as well, right? So how a mining pool functions is that when you set up a mining pool, ideally you also have your own equipment, you also have your own ASICs. And other than that, if people want to join you, then the more the number of people that join you, the higher your hash rate goes. So it is expected and obvious that most mining pools will use their own infrastructure to keep mining on their own job templates. But mining pools can also allow other miners to broadcast their templates and mine their templates. And if other participants of that mining pool want to mine on a job that has been submitted by a remote miner, they can do that, right? So uh, like it's like mining pools can still create their own blocks the way they used to in Stratum V1, but now even the remote miners can create their own blocks. But that is absolutely at the helm of the mining pool. So the remote miners cannot force it. It's absolutely up to the consent of the mining pool. If the mining pool allows, the mining pool should allow the remote miners and incorporate their blocks and allow them and give them permission to mine with them. So that is, I thought of giving an overview of what Stratum V1 was and what Stratum V2 is, and what is the difference between the two of them, what are the upgrades and what are the enhancements, so that we can understand what the problem statement is that this extension is trying to solve. Initially, what used to happen is that the mining pool is creating one single block, right? So if the share of revenue was distributed among the miners based on their hash rate. Okay, so because there's only one mining pool is working only on one block, right? One mining pool is not working on multiple blocks. If there is a mining pool A, that mining pool A will create one candidate block. It will work on that candidate block, and all the individual or the remote miners that are contributing their hash power to that mining pool, all of them will collectively work on that one specific block. In this situation, what happens is that there are no multiple blocks, so the fee reward is known, right? And every single miner is remunerated in accordance or in direct proportion of their hash rate. So if you have contributed X amount of work towards mining that block, you will get paid in accordance with X. If somebody has contributed X plus 1, they get paid in accordance with X plus 1. If somebody has contributed X plus 2, they get paid in accordance with X plus 2. So every single miner in a mining pool where only one single block is being created gets paid in accordance with the hash rate that they have uh, uh, expended, the hash rate or the work, the amount of work that they have done on mining that block. Okay, now this is pretty straightforward. Now, when you come to an ecosystem where within one mining pool there are multiple job templates that people are working on. Okay, so there's one mining pool where 500 people, let's say, are diverting their hash power. 100 are working on one block, 100 are working on the other block, 50 are working on the third block, 40 are working on the fourth block, 15 are working on the fifth block. So like 500 miners are then they're working on 10 different blocks. All right, now these 10 different blocks will obviously look different, right? They will have a different set of transactions. When they have a different set of transactions, it's incumbent that they will also have a different set of mining fee, right? So 100 miners are working on a block that pays X amount of fee, and 50 miners are working on a block that pays X plus 1 amount of fee, and 40 miners are working on a block that pays X plus 2 amount of fee, right? So there are different miners that are working on different blocks, and those different blocks have different contents, and because they have different contents, they also have different fee, right? And one of those miners will find a block. Now the question is, let's assume there's a mining pool which has two blocks. The mining pool is working on two blocks. One is an empty block, and the other is a block that has a very handsome high fee. Okay, so if a miner mines an empty block, he gets paid the same. If we carry forward the Stratum V1 mechanism of fee payout, then we only look at the hash rate, right? The amount of hash rate that you've dedicated, you get paid in accordance with that, irrespective of how much fee the block that you mine gives you. So there are two miners working in one pool. One miner is mining an empty block, and the other miner is mining a block which has a handsome amount of fee. Okay. Now, if the miner who's mining an empty block finds a block, he will get paid the same amount of money as the miner who is mining a block with a handsome amount of fee will get paid. Why? Because we are not taking into consideration the fee discrepancy. We are only taking into consideration the amount of hash rate a miner is dedicating, the amount of work that a miner is putting into this block. Because up till now, we did not have this concept of multiple blocks being mined in a single mining pool. It was a foreign concept. You were living in a world where one single pool was creating one single block, that is it. But now, if we transition to a world where one single mining pool can have multiple blocks, then those multiple blocks will have multiple fees as well, right? Somebody might mine an empty block and get very low fee. Somebody might mine a block with a very handsome fee. Somebody might mine a block with moderate fee. So it is a new and an unprecedented scenario. Now it would be unfair to give the same amount of reward to a miner who mines an empty block and give the same amount of reward to a miner that mines a block with a very handsome fee rate, right? So the fix is that now we will not only take the hash rate into consideration, we will also take the fee into consideration. So if a miner is mining empty block in a pool and a miner is mining a block with a very handsome fee rate in the same pool. So both the blocks are being mined in the same pool. If the miner with an empty block finds uh, a block, he finds a valid nonce, we will pay him less because he earned less fee. And if the miner that is mining a block with a high fee, with a very handsome fee, mines a block, we will pay him more. So up till now, because there was no concept of multiple blocks being mined in a mining pool, this question never arose. But now that we are transitioning to a world where one mining pool will have multiple block templates, we also have to take into consideration the fee. The hash rate alone, paying miners based on the hash rate that they dedicate alone is not unfair, because if two miners dedicate the same amount of hash rate in the same amount of time period, but one miner is mining an empty block and one miner is mining a block with a very handsome period, and both of them get paid equally because they contributed equal hash rate, that would be unfair to the miner who is mining a block with a high period. So now we have to take one more factor into consideration, which we want previously, which is the fee. So now we do not want to pay miners merely based on their hash rate. We also want to take into consideration the fee that they are bringing to the pool, and that can be done by looking at their specific block candidate. So that is what this proposal as a whole is about. It proposes a fee revenue sharing mechanism where not only the hash rate, but also the amount of fee that a miner generates will be taken into consideration while paying them. That's what it is broadly. It contains multiple research papers, which obviously is outside the purview of this chapter, but we will still try and go through at least one or two articles or links in it, and just I'll try and explain one or two terminologies to make it a little more concrete. But I hope I was able to convey a broader context of what this fee revenue sharing is trying to achieve. And I hope that everybody understood what this fee revenue sharing is trying to achieve. If there are any questions pertaining Stratum V1, Stratum V2, and the fee revenue sharing, whatever I've covered up till now, please feel free to unmute yourself and ask questions before we proceed.
Hey Faisal, yeah, thanks for that explanation. It was great. I had a quick question about what you were talking about. So, like, if we think from a game theoretical point of view, won't this proposal discourage mining empty blocks because if you because you can get more share of the revenue if you mine a block with a high fee, right?
Right, 100%.
So then, so then this is discouraging miners from mining empty blocks. Am I
Yes.
correct to assume that?
Yeah, I mean, ideally, no miner would want to mine a block with no miner would ideally want to mine an empty block. Like generally, whenever we find empty blocks, every few days we hear that a miner found empty block or miner found an empty block. That
Mhm.
generally happens because uh, I mean, the moment one miner finds a block, okay, and he announces the block, and the other miner gets to know that one block has been found, it takes like fractional amount of time for that miner to create a new block and populate it with transactions. But what the miners do is that they don't wait for that block to get populated. The moment they get the information that a certain block has been mined, they immediately start generating nonsense for the new block even before they populate it with transactions. So generally, that is when we find an empty block. It would be like I cannot think of any rational reason for somebody to intentionally mine an empty block. Empty blocks are generally found by mining pools because it's a happenstance, because they manage to find the right nodes even before they end up populating the block with transactions. So like empty block, for example, it could be like two miners mining, one having a moderate fee, another having a high fee. Now, generally, most algorithms are built in such a way that they optimize fee like high fee transactions. So every miner wants to put transactions in their block with the highest fee, right? But it might be that two miners are mining and both of them are mining with the same fee. Okay. Now one fellow runs out of nonsense, so he kind of shuffles his own transactions, and in the meantime, the estimated fee rate in the mempool has gone up. So he ends up adding more high fee transactions, and then his candidate block becomes a block with a higher fee. So that could be one scenario. But the bottom line being that what this proposal is trying to achieve is that if you generate more revenue for the pool, even if you've done the same work, you deserve more a higher reward. So even if two people are doing the same amount of work, if one person is generating a higher revenue for the pool, they deserve to get a higher compensation. And as for empty blocks, then empty blocks are found as a happenstance, like no miner or no pool intentionally tries to find empty blocks.
Like, I can't comment on mining pools, but there are a lot of solo miners who just try to find empty blocks, and a lot of them have been like successful as well.
All right. So what use case can you think of them? Like what would
Like,
motivate a miner to find an empty block?
the block subsidy is like enough to like motivate them to mine uh, empty blocks. So as long as we have block subsidy, I think uh, we'll keep seeing empty blocks But once we run out of that, I think there's no incentive after we run out of block subsidy.
Right, maybe, but I still cannot. I mean, I'll have to enter that miner's head because I cannot see a single incentive for somebody intentionally mining an empty block. So yeah, maybe if there is somebody, maybe you can refer it to me. I'd love to understand what would be the reason for somebody to intentionally mine an empty block, because the amount of work you have to do in mining an empty block and the amount of work that you have to do in mining a block with full of transactions is the same. So like, why would somebody intentionally want to miss out on the fee?
Because there are a lot of people who there are a lot less people who actively try to mine an empty block. So like you can't compete with a mining pool when it comes to like mining a proper block with a lot of transactions. But if the mining pool is not mining an empty block, and if you happen to find a nonce that is like valid to correctly mine a empty block, then yeah, why not do that?
Yeah, I
Maybe
just want to take a quick guess. So I think for a solo miner, whenever there's a valid block being found, and when the information is propagated to him or her that there's a valid block being found by the full node that that solo miner is connected to, the time it takes for it to populate a new block and create the Merkle root and create the block header
Mhm.
might be resource intensive. So it might be beneficial for him to start mining on an empty block. This is the only reason that I can think that why will they be incentivized to start hashing on an empty block instead of populating it with transactions.
Yeah, but that's a happenstance. You don't do that intentionally, right? You are still populating the block. Before you populating the block, you don't want to wait for that fraction of a second, right? Because your ASIC can perform trillions of hashes within a second. So even if it takes 1 second for you to populate your block with transactions, you don't even want to wait that for that 1 second. And even during the process, when your block is being populated, you start hashing. But that's a happenstance. Like you don't wake up in the morning and say, today, yes, I'm gonna mine an empty block, right? It's just that there is that latency and you don't want to waste that time. So instead of sitting idle, why not just start hashing?
Right.
So that is what you do, and you wait for the block to get populated. You don't say that, okay, I don't want the block to get populated at all. I will intentionally for the next 10 minutes just keep on mining an empty block.
True, true.
All
Okay, yeah,
right.
I see. Thanks.
Cool. Yeah, you're most welcome. A couple of terminologies just that we can touch up on. And this is applicable to PPLNS, by the way, not to FPPS. Okay, because FPPS gives you standard payout. Okay, so like recently, even at Bitshala, we had a bid devs, and a lot of people who like narrated to me how the bid devs went about and summarized the important discussions that happened. Told me that this FPPS issue was brought up. So there, it is like you get a fixed payout, right? You get a fixed payout. There are time intervals like 4 times a day or whatever is the pre-stipulated time. You get a fixed payout at that amount of time. So there's no question of variance there. But this is applicable to PPLNS, which is basically a fee variance. So your when the pool finds a block, you get paid, and you get paid in accordance with the last n shares. So your payout is neither guaranteed nor is it fixed. It varies. Pretty similar to tides. A lot of attributes are pretty similar to tides. So yeah, I did I open another or did I accidentally close it? All right, so we know what's a share. We've discussed about what a share is in our preceding sessions. Okay, so there are two things. One is the network difficulty, and the other is pool difficulty. Network difficulty, you if you manage to find a nonce that is higher than the network difficulty, then you mine a block. Then you successfully mine a block. But obviously, with every hash, you cannot do that. So what pools do is that pools set a lower bound, which is known as a share, which is the pool's difficulty level. So if the network's difficulty level is 100x, the pool might set a difficulty level of x. So if your hash reaches 100x, you end up mining a block. But if your hash reaches x, the pool will pay you. If it's less than x, the pool will not pay you, because then your hash has hardly contributed any value to the pool. So the pool will not pay you. And that is why a lot of people who are into mining, like people who are, I mean, I got an opportunity to interact with somebody uh, who is the CTO of a mining company, and he was like very like discouraging me from using node miners, and like he was very pessimistic about it, because he said that these small devices are never going to create a share. They will just end up wasting the pool's resources, because every time you generate a hash, the pool has to invest their bandwidth and resources to measure that hash, to check whether that hash has reached the share, the minimum share or no, to check whether that hash is makes you eligible for a payment or no. And these small devices like node miners, they very rarely, seldom do they ever generate a hash which even meets the network, which even meets the pool difficulty level. But the pool has to invest a lot of resources in keeping a track of their hashes to verify whether they are eligible for a payout for their share or no. So like he was a lot of people who understand like the intricacies of Bitcoin mining are not very optimistic about node miners and even Bitaxes. But slowly and gradually, we're getting small devices that can reach up to 2 terahashes, 2.5 terahashes, which is pretty positive. But mining with devices anything less than that, like it's very difficult for you to find a block, and it also increases the overheads of a mining pool. So yeah, the point being, what is a share? A share is a hash that a miner generates, which is above the pool's difficulty level, which makes a miner uh, eligible for a compensation for that specific share. Okay. What is a slide? A slide is basically a window of share. A slice is a window of share in context to this protocol that we're talking about, right? It's not used anywhere else. Generally, people use it as a window. They use it as a payment window, but here they call it slice. What's a slice? A slice is a collection of shares that a miner generates when the maximum mempool fee is constant. Okay, so I generated the first share. Okay, I created a hash which is above the pool's difficulty level. So that's a share. I generated a share. Okay, let's say when I generated a share, the maximum mempool fee was X. Okay, so your mempool is like your algorithm is designed in a manner that it will choose the most highest fee paying transactions from your mempool. Okay, so it is designed in a manner that it chooses the transactions with which it can generate the maximum mempool fee. So let's say I create my first hash, which is a valid share. And at that point in time, the maximum mempool fee rate is 10 sites per virtual byte. All the hashes that I create for 10 sats per virtual byte will be one share. So let's say will be one slide. So let's say I create 1 million shares at 10 sats per virtual byte. That is one slice. After that, something happens and the fee of the network goes up. It goes from like my mempool's maximum fee was 10 sats per virtual byte. Now something happens, like new transactions come into my mempool, and now it becomes 12. And I create another block. So now the slice will have an average, will have a fee rate of 12. Okay, so that is how we keep a track of how much fee a miner is generating based on the slice. So if a miner finds a block, he will look at the slice, like what was the maximum mempool fee rate at the time when the miner was mining this block, and how many hashes or how many shares did the miner create during that slide. So you will pay the miner in accordance with the share that it produced in a slice. So
Hey,
up till now we were only
is this based on the new payout mechanism, or is this also valid in paper share? Like, is this also relevant for paper share payouts?
are you talking about FPPS, I'm assuming, right? Yeah,
Yes.
FPPS, sorry, paper FPPS. No, it's not valid because there's no variance there. No, there's no variance. Like you like have a contract with the pool. The pool tells you that I will pay you X amount of money. So there's no question of getting more than that or less than that. You get a fixed payout. Even there is a mechanism for that, but that payout does not change that rapidly. It does not
So
change that rapidly. It generally
my question
changes when the
my
sorry.
question was like, currently a lot of miners operate in paper share pools, right?
Right.
And this new proposal that Stratum V2 has is paper last two shares or something like that, no?
Yeah,
Uh,
last N shares.
Last 10 shares. So Slice, was it relevant even back then when there was a paper share payout, or is it only relevant now when we have paper last n shares?
So slice is only relevant when a mining pool allows its miners to create multiple blocks. uh, and right now no mining pool on this planet is doing that. So right now I mean, this only takes effect when there are multiple blocks being mined in the same pool, right? Because if there is only one block being mined by a mining pool, then there is no question of multiple blocks, right? So you, no matter who is the miner will always going to be finding that same block with the same fee. So there's no question of two different miners working on two different blocks having two different fee rates. This discrepancy or this fee slice fee that we are taking into consideration is only when the miner allows multiple block templates to be working on miners to be working on multiple block templates at the same time. So currently there is no actual use case for this. Okay, it's a
And that is
proposal.
possible in Stratum V2, right? In Stratum V2, individual miners can choose different block templates. Is that
Right,
right?
right, right.
Okay. So now it will be valid. If
Yeah,
miners, if pool adopts it,
yeah, any pool, right? Any pool who allows multiple miners to mine their own blocks, create their own decentralized blocks, then in that case, if they want, they can adopt this payment scheme. It's a proposal. It's not mandatory. It's not that if you're using Stratum V2, you have to use it. It's a proposal. So like the miners can accept this, the miners cannot accept it. It's a proposal. It's an extension.
got it.
All right. Yeah, so this was the first proposal. If anybody has anything to share, please feel free to go ahead. I will drink water for 10 seconds, and after that, we can
Just
move
one
on
more
to the
question.
second.
So paper last share, is that like I think I remembered the bit devs and I was like surprised to know that it's not constant. Like the pool basically keeps an idea of what's the hashing capacity of individual miners who are joining that pool, and depending upon where they stand, they put different paper shares to they offer different paper shares to different miners. So, for example, someone who's a nerd miner will have a probably lower threshold to achieve, and someone who is like running a bigger mining setup might have a separate threshold to achieve. Is that correct? Or like is
Yeah,
that my
yeah, yeah. That's correct. So there in FPPS, there is no variance. In paper, last and shares, there's variance.
okay? Okay.
All right, fine. Let's move on to the second one. We have any new participants? Anything in the chat? Anmol left us.
Hey everyone, to the new faces in the Bitcoin Optech.
Yeah. Hi, Tony. Hi, Debo Priyo. Yeah. TV Peter. Hi.
TV Peter is
Anmol was also here.
part of our cohort also. Yeah, so
Anmol
he's
was also a new face for Optech.
I think he just came for mining, and then once that got covered, he left.
Okay, all right. Cool. Opcat Research Fund. Uh, Shreyan will tell us what are covenants before we talk about what's Opcat.
Okay. So covenants, the word is derived from legal terminology. It means contracts, and in Bitcoin they are used to um, create locking scripts which allow you to define more conditions. And how they are implemented is that whenever you spend a UTXO, you can create a condition for the output to be spent in a specific way. So on a very layman friendly way, you can imagine your Bitcoin being logged in a way that only you define can be further unlocked. So yeah, that's a very
Right.
overview definition. Is that correct?
No, that's correct. Right. So up till now we have a mechanism in Bitcoin to lock the inputs. Right. We have a locking script that locks the inputs, and we have an unlocking script that unlocks the or basically that spends the outputs. But you have no mechanism uh, that allows you to lock the outputs. What covenants do is that they allow you to lock the outputs, not only the inputs, but also the outputs. So before receiving a transaction, you can specify a condition that once I receive this transaction, I will spend it only to a certain address. And then that transaction will only go to that certain address. Or you can specify that I will spend only half of the amount in this transaction, and the other half will come back to me as change. So this gives a defense mechanism to you. All right. So let's say if you lock the output of a transaction using covenants to one of your own addresses, even if somebody steals your private key, they can send that transaction only to your address. Or if you decide that I will only spend 10% of this UTXO to any random address, and the 90% will come back to my change address. Even if somebody finds your private key, they can only spend 10% of it, and the other 90% is going to come back to your own change address. And there are other use cases as well. So that's what covenants achieve. And there are multiple. Currently, we have covenants in Bitcoin. They are pre-signed covenants. Uh, pre-multi-signature covenants, in fact, and like barely anybody uses it because maybe the mechanism is very complex, so wallets don't support them. There has been a lot of talk in the community about covenants and about different ways to achieve them. OpCTV is one opcode that achieves it, and OpCat is the other. These are the like two most talked about, and there are people for it, there are people against it, like every single thing in Bitcoin. So what does this news article say? It says Optech Research Fund Victor Kolobov posted to the Bitcoin Dev mailing list to announce a 1 million fund for research into a proposed software clad in Opcat opcode. Topics of interest include, but are not limited to, the security implications of Opcat, activation on Bitcoin, Opcat-based computing and unlocking script logic on Bitcoin, applications and protocols utilizing Opcat on Bitcoin, and general research related to Opcat and its impact. Submissions must be received by 1st January 2025. Who among you is submitting? Raise hands. Two guys from Bitshala want to submit. They are not here to raise their hands. All right. So it's pretty common in Bitcoin for people to announce bounties in Bitcoin and also in Lightning, because it's an open source network. Like generally, most people are volunteer contributors, so you need some motivation to invest your time and energy on projects, and bounties are one of the ways of achieving that. Uh, so there has been a talk about covenants and soft forks. Generally, soft forks are very something that is very disputed and detested in the Bitcoin community. Like the Bitcoin community has always been very reluctant to soft forks, and until and unless it has not had its back towards the wall, Bitcoin community has always avoided soft forks. So in fact, Bitcoin community has always avoided any major changes to Bitcoin. Because obviously, when you make changes to Bitcoin and they are not well thought of and they are not tested regressively, there are obviously implications that happen. And Bitcoin is probably, not probably, to me, definitely the most important piece of software humans have ever written. It's fragile and needs to be handled with care. Any single change in Bitcoin needs to be thoroughly tested, tried again and again. Only if it has passed all the possible tests and all the avenues of breaking it have been exhausted, and it stands the test of time, only then it should be added. That is in the pros that has been taken for the past 14 years. So yeah, Covenants is a soft fork. So obviously, like every soft fork, there is a lot of research and discussion in the community about it, whether it will open up avenues for exploitation. So recently, a bounty has been announced for people who want to work on Opcat, for it or against it. So if you feel that Opcat is good for Bitcoin, it has use cases, then as a developer, you might want to prove it. So there are a group of people, there is a community, there's a committee that's been appointed. You can come up with your proposals, your suggestions. Maybe try it's on Signet, by the way. Opcat has a BIP number assigned to it, and it's also on the Signet. So you can go on Signet, do some testing or something that you're doing on your own, your research work. And if you believe that Opcat is good for Bitcoin and you've tested it enough adequately, and it prima facie it does not have any avenues for exploitation, then give your proposal, share your work, start working on it, and you will be eligible for a bounty. And if you think Opcat is bad for Bitcoin for whatever reason, then you can work on that as well. Try and find faults in it. Try and find security vulnerabilities in it. Try and find avenues through which it can be exploited. It's on the Signet, and prove that as well. So the bounty is of 1 million US dollars. It's obviously like one person is will not get all of it. So the bounty is bifurcated into different aspects. Like some of them are mentioned, right? Security implications about it, and a lot of other things. If you're pro it, if you're anti it, security implementation implications and all. So it is bifurcated. I don't exactly know what's the architecture of bifurcation, but it is bifurcated into multiple sections. So you can pick whatever suits you, whether you think this is good for Bitcoin, whether you think this is bad for Bitcoin. You can work on it and claim a bounty for those who are interested. So let us just read the mailing list letter broadly. Starkware has announced a 1 million bounty for compelling arguments either in favor of or against the activation of OPCAT. This bounty is overseen by a committee which includes the following members. So these are the members. Okay, this is the committee that decides who gets the grant and who doesn't, and you have to convince these people whether opcode is good for you or for Bitcoin or bad for Bitcoin. The bounty is intended to gather well reasoned arguments from the community, either supporting or opposing the activation of OPCAT. topics of interest include, but are not limited to, the security implications of opcat activation on Bitcoin, opcat-based computing and locking script logic on Bitcoin, applications and protocols utilizing opcat on Bitcoin, and general research related to opcat and its impact. So, like these are some of the avenues or streams that people can explore. Whether you support opcat or whether you oppose opcat, interest could be security implications or opcat based computing and locking script logic, or applications and protocols utilizing opcat on Bitcoin, and general research on related to opcat and its impact. So these are like four broad categories which people can work on and submit their proposals before 1st of January. So I think there's still like 4 months or so. Right. So not much to talk about in this news article. It's a bounty. Any questions about this or any thoughts? If
I mean,
nothing,
if you can talk
yeah.
about like what's the benefit of opcat and what is the major major complaint that people have with activating opcat. I'm not up to the speed on this, so that's why.
The benefit is that it. I mean, it's like this will take I think some time because it's like there are so many different opinions. It's not that the community has one opinion about a covenants, right? So let alone opcat, there is a divide in the community as far as I know, even about covenants. There are people who want covenants, there are people who don't want covenants at all. There are people who want soft forks, there are people who want Bitcoin to get ossified. So there are a lot of people who want ossification will say we don't want any opcodes. People who want uh, uh, like people who don't want ossification will say that what's the rush for a new soft fork? Like we don't even want a soft fork right now. Let's delay the soft fork for later, right? People who want a soft fork might say, why Opcat? Why not OpsCTV? Like a lot of people in the community that I know are more inclined towards OpsCTV. Like Peter Todd recently published a research paper, a mammoth research paper, in which he went through all the proposals for achieving covenants, and he summarized. I did not go through that paper. I really want to go through that paper. But the summary is that the TLDR is that he is in favor of OpsCTV, like of all the different mechanisms by which OpCat can be covenants can be achieved. He is of the opinion of OpsCTV, and there are one or two very reputed developers, Bitcoin developers, like with an experience of over 10 years that the community looks up to. I have also heard them say things which are um, like regard OpsCTV highly. So that question is it's pretty arbitrary. There are like about every single thing in Bitcoin there are dozens of opinions. If there were just two opinions, I would have told you, okay, there's this opinion and there's that opinion, but there's like so much of diversity. Some people don't want soft forks at all. Some people want soft forks, they don't want covenants at all. Some people want covenants, they don't want opcat at all. Some people want opcat. Okay. Now the plus point obviously is that they enable covenants. So if you believe that covenants are needed and a soft fork is needed and covenants can add functionality, like me and Shreyan just now mentioned what covenants achieve, if you think that, hey, wow, that's a wonderful use case, then that is a pro for you. If you feel that, hey, that's not a use case, we don't need to lock outputs, okay, it's not something that Bitcoin cannot exist without, we're not dying for this functionality for us to pull a soft fork. A soft fork is something that we do when we are in a dire need of it. We are not in dire need of locking outputs or achieving covenants, then maybe you would not want a soft fork at all. So people who vouch for Opcat say that it enhances Bitcoin's functionality. It allows you to lock outputs, and there are a lot of other things that you can achieve using covenants. Like you can achieve walls and a lot of other things. So that is their argument that it adds more functionality and more features to Bitcoin. It gives more use cases, which will attract more users, which will attract more adoption. And people who are not for Opcat, they might have a lot of reasons. They might just be not in favor of Opcat because they want to ossify Bitcoin. They might not be in favor of Opcat because they believe covenants are not even a use case. They might not be in favor of Opcat because they don't want soft forks. And one reason could also be that in software, what happens is that you can never predict that a software is foolproof, right? As humans, you can try a software, you can test a software, but you can never guarantee that a software will never have any bugs, right? Every single software that goes out, whether it's a Mac OS, whether it's Windows OS, whether it's Android OS, whatever, like there are a lot of people who rigorously test it. Despite that, every now and then we hear that there was a bug in Windows. It's not that Microsoft did not test that software and one morning they just decided that we're going to put this software on everybody's computer. No, like there is a team of trained professionals that thoroughly checks every version of Windows operating system. Only after that thorough check, months and months of checking, is that operating system pushed onto people's laptops. Despite that, one day of usage and we see there's a bug, and all the Windows operating systems are not working anymore. This happens everywhere. This happens in Bitcoin as well, right? Every week we come here and we talk about vulnerabilities and bugs. We talk about, oh, a new bug found in Bitcoin, oh, a new vulnerability found in Bitcoin. Now, when this version of Bitcoin Core was released, it was tested, right? A few days ago, Bitcoin Core 28 version 28 was tested, right? So thorough testing has been done. Some of the proposals that were merged in Bitcoin Core 28 were tested for the past 3 to 5 years. So thorough testing was done, and after that, those changes were made. But eventually, the testers are humans, right? So even no matter how much you test the software, it is never immune to bugs. So like one argument is that, okay, no matter how much you test it, and you are certain that Opcat is has no avenues for exploitation, eventually the testers are human. What if we activate this on the mainnet and later on some bug that we were not able to detect, we discover that? We discover that and then people start exploiting it. What do we do then? Right? So do we really need this? Is it so much in Are we so much in need of governance that we want to do a soft fork, and that soft fork might open up avenues for new bugs? Because this has happened in Bitcoin in past. Like previously we've had soft forks that were tried and tested, but after they were implemented on the mainnet, somehow or the other some bug was found and that bug was exploited, and then fixing it becomes very difficult. So like one point of view is also, like, to be a very conservative point of view, that we should not push for soft forks until and unless we absolutely and direly need those soft forks. Do we absolutely and direly need governance for us to push Opcat on the mainnet? So this is one argument that I keep hearing against any soft forks, not only Opcat. And the pro is that it adds functionality to Bitcoin. So this is what I could summarize. I hope it made some sense to you.
Yeah, I could understand. Thanks, Fazil.
Yeah, welcome.
Well, I just had one quick question. I think governance in Bitcoin mean locking inputs, right? Because we lock outputs in the locking script, and somebody can use that by creating the unlocking script and um, creating the valid digital signature. Just
No, it is locking outputs, no? The one that you plan to send it to someone, you can lock it consumed in certain ways, in my opinion.
right, right. Yeah, this is something that's not clear to me. I mean, I think from the use case point of view, I understand that you are locking output in a way that when that output is being used as the input, it can only be used in a certain way. This is the use case level understanding. But yeah, I was not clear with how what exactly is being logged here.
So the gist is the output of the previous transaction is the input of current transaction. So if you're referring to the previous transaction, that same thing you call it output. And when you're referring to the current transaction, the same UTXO, you refer to it as an input,
Right,
right?
right,
So
right.
if
Essentially,
Alice pays, yeah, if Alice pays to Bob, okay, the UTXO that Alice is sending to Bob is the output for Alice, and the UTXO that the same UTXO when Bob receives it is the input for Bob. So I'm referring to Bob's output, not Alice's output.
right. Makes sense. Makes sense.
All right, cool. We're in 8:55. This is pretty detailed. I was wondering, I give the choice to you all. Either we cover this in the next 5 to 10 minutes, mitigating Merkle tree vulnerabilities, or we go to see what's new in Bitcoin Core 28.0 release candidate in the next 10 minutes. Which one? The choice is yours.
I think I would like to see what's new.
Okay, say to for what's new. Anybody else would like to voice their opinion?
Yeah, let's go for checking the new release because I think it's also relevant to the cohort that we're going through.
Right. What security risks could arise from re-enabling Opcat in Bitcoin? In a gist, Prio Opcat was activated on Bitcoin by Satoshi Nakamoto. long ago. Okay, so it's not that Bitcoin is planning to introduce or people want to introduce opcode again. But opcat was a part of what we call Satoshi's implementation or the reference implementation. Okay, and Satoshi was the one who introduced opcat, and Satoshi was the one who removed opcat. So today we don't have opcat because Satoshi removed it. Why did he remove it? What does opcat do? Opcat concatenates. Okay, as the name suggests, it concatenates. So if you have a Bitcoin script in which you have two, and then you have two, so the first element on the stack is two, the second element is two, and the third element is opcat. What opcat will do is that it will take those two elements and concatenate that. Two plus two will give you four. Okay, so that is what opcat does. It concatenates. It takes the top two elements of the stack and it concatenates it. So what happened is that back then there was no limit to the size of a stack element, to the size of a stack element. There was no upper limit. Okay, so somebody can put two opcat becomes four opcat becomes eight opcat becomes 16 opcat becomes 32, and they can do it infinitely till people's node crash, right? So the number can become so big that it starts overflowing and people's nodes crash. So if somebody writes a script in which they have like infinite, or not infinite, but lots and lots of opcodes. Okay, like you can keep on adding two elements. You add two elements and two elements and two elements and two elements and two elements. You reach a level where it overflows the script. People's node can crash. So it was an attack vector. So Satoshi decided to remove it. But now with Taproot, what has happened is that there is an upper limit of, I believe, 520 bytes for tap scripts. So now we use tap scripts, like an enhanced version of Bitcoin scripting language, which is compatible with Taproot transactions, which is known as TapScript. In TapScripts, one element cannot exceed 520 bytes. So that vulnerability or that attack vector is now out of picture. Okay, so if you take two elements of the stack, you concatenate them, then you take two more, you concatenate them, you can only do this till 520. The moment an element reaches 520 bytes on the tap script, it cannot go beyond. So now there is no possibility of that attack vector happening, right? Which was possible back then. All right, but the rationale is, like, I think I talked about it in detail. I don't know when you asked the question. Maybe I talked. Okay, no, you asked it. Huh, for it, I think I answered it after that. Okay, so nobody can predict what security implications the software can have, right? Because I said every single time a software is released, it is tried and tested thoroughly, but eventually it is tried and tested by humans. There is always a use case that you might miss. There is always a bug that you might miss. There is always a vulnerability that you might miss, and you always miss it. Every single version of Bitcoin Core has gets tested thoroughly, but despite that, later on, some bug or some vulnerability is found, even in Lightning and in every software. So the question is, are we in desperately in need of a soft fork that we want to expose? And like the bugs and vulnerabilities that might happen in a soft fork can be really ugly, and it's happened in the past. So like the conservative section of this of the community is like, do we really need covenants that bad that we want to push for a soft fork? What if it opens up avenues for exploitation like it has happened in the past? So that is one of the many arguments. Like there are many arguments, but one of the many arguments, because you talked about security implications. Cool, we're at 9 for the next 10 minutes. Let's talk about a few things. So Bitcoin Core 28.0's release candidate came out recently. Where did it go? Oh, yeah, testing guide. Maybe we'll find it better. And we have talked about almost all of these things regularly. So if any of you have been attending the Optech newsletter session at Bitshala on Mondays, you are familiar with every single thing, every single meaning, every single thing. Like we've had multiple topics on each and everything. We had 3 to 4 topics dedicated only to testnet 4, where we talked about time warp attack and how testnet 4 fixes it. We've had 3 to 4 sessions about V3 transactions, which are also known as struct transactions. We talked about pinning, we talked about anchor outputs, we talked about we talked about uh, I can't find that name now. Sibling eviction. We talked about sibling eviction in detail, and if you go into this testing guide, you'll find all of these things. I'll show you sibling eviction, and also you all can now relate. If any of you decide to test, like you'll find it very easy. We'll see sibling eviction. We had I think a couple of sessions only on sibling eviction. So all of that, all of those things that we have discussed over the past 6 months are now coming to life. And what else do we have in 28.0? Where did it go? And then we have package RBF. We've talked about this as well, where a parent transaction has very little fee, such that it cannot be included in the block. So uh, you use a child transaction to bump its fee, and then you broadcast the entire package. We've covered this as well, package RBF in detail. Mempool conflicting transactions, we've talked about this as well on a lot of occasions. Mempool full RBF, we talked about this a couple of months ago. All right, so now mempool full RBF is will be on by default. So every single Bitcoin transaction, uh, like when basically if you download Bitcoin Core 28.0 and you spin it, so by default your RBF feature will be on. Now it's all off, right? You have to either signal for RBF or you need to go to the your bitcoin.conf file and you need to activate your mempool for RBF so that all your transactions by default will be uh, eligible for fee bumping. But now they've made it default, and this PR was opened 11 years ago. I think it was opened by 11. It was opened 11 years ago by Peter Todd. I think it got closed or it did not attain consensus in the community, so he decided to run his own implementation. And recently, I got to know. I don't know if this information is right or not, but he does not share the code with anyone. Like there are various different implementations of Bitcoin Core. There are language translations of Bitcoin Core, meaning Bitcoin Core has been translated into different languages. There are also forks of Bitcoin Core, and all of them are open source. I'm still not 100% sure, so please don't take my word on it. But I have an idea. I read it somewhere where he was talking about that he's looking for some grants to continue his work on his implementation. And if he gets the grant, then he will open source the code. So I just got an implication that maybe the version that Peter Todd maintains, he's not released the code out for the public, and that is why it has like almost zero adoption. Nobody uses it. So yeah, now in Bitcoin Core 28 onwards, you will not have to uh, signal BIP 125, nor will you have to go and make any changes to your Bitcoin.conf file. By default, every single transaction will be eligible to be replaced by fee. Pay to anchor script spending, we did an entire PR review club on this on Monday, Bitshala session. Okay, so basically these are zero fee and zero value outputs that can be bumped. They are proposed as a mitigation for pinning, especially in L2 transactions like the Lightning transaction. New dump UTXO outset. This is, I think, the only thing that we've missed. I don't remember covering this in the Optech or the latest in Bitcoin Tech session on Monday because I myself cannot recall it. And bonuses assume UTXO. We've had a couple of sessions on this as well, and this was included in the code and Docker releases in some of the preceding sessions. So if you've been attending regularly, or even if you attended 70 to 80% of our Monday sessions for the past 6 months, then you know 90% of these things thoroughly. We covered them in detail on multiple occasions, and then you can just get your hands dirty on the testing tool and just test everything on testnet 4. You can see how testnet 4 works, and then what you can check v3 transaction. You see v2 up till now we have v2 transactions, right? We have version number 1 and 2 are standard, right? So whenever you look at a Bitcoin transaction in its hexadecimal format, it either starts with 01. A standard transaction either starts with 01 or it starts with 02, and 02 implies segment compatibility. Now we also have 03. So now you see if you test it, you'll see 03. 03 means it's a truck transaction, it's a v3 transaction. So you can do all of these things and a lot of other things to check these out. uh, One or two things we just touch on, and then we can wind up the session. One thing very interesting that I saw yesterday, not able to find. Yeah, so basically you can what you can do is one exercise that was given is that you create a parent transaction, you attach a child to it. Okay, so what are V3 transactions or truck transactions? A truck transaction cannot have more than one unconfirmed child. So you create a parent, okay, you attach a child to it and you broadcast it to the mempool. Okay, then you try and create another child to that child and then you broadcast it to the mempool, it get rejected. So you can do all of these testings, all the things that we've studied theoretically, and at times we even delved into the code and the PRs. But now you can hands-on experience all of these things, like sibling eviction. We've tested, right? So there's sibling one. You create a transaction. Okay, you create a child with a low fee, then you create another child for the same transaction with a high fee. Sibling 2 will evict sibling 1 because sibling 2 is paying a high fee. So you can check sibling eviction on your own. TX with uncle is a third child. Okay, so you have a transaction, you attach a child to it, okay, and then you attach another child to it. You attach another child to it, and then it gets rejected from the mempool. See, transaction failed. It will say start. So you submit the entire package of the parent and the sibling and the uncle, all three in succession. It will give you an error. It will say transaction failed. Is the reason mentioned? No, the reason not mentioned, but the transaction will fail. The package will fail. So this is some testing that you can do. A lot of things that we've talked about. You can broadcast a transaction with a very low fee and then attach a child with a high fee and then relay the child and the parent as package relay and check if package relay works or not. Then you can create a transaction without signaling for BIP 125 and then try and replacing that transaction with a higher fee transaction to see if mempool full RBF is working or no. So you can test all of these things that we have covered in our sessions throughout the past 6 months or so. Yeah, that is the testing guide, and that is all we have to share from our end. I will stop sharing my screen now, and we're open for question answers or any casual discussions. Right? Any thoughts? Any comments? Any questions? I have no questions, nothing to share. Then everybody can leave.